For those of you who are not aware, Congressional Debate is a division of most predominantly the NSDA, National Speech and Debate Association. That is the overarching association for speech and debate programs in the majority of the US. There are a couple other associations. NSDA is by far the largest, a couple million members, hosts the largest academic competition in the world every June with its national tournament. It's a good thing to put on college apps, to say for short. If you do well, it's not difficult to flaunt. So Congress is a foot in the door to this world of forensics that I fell in love with. For a little bit of background on me, I'm from Minnesota. I was doing, in my first year, Lincoln Douglas debate, and then for the next 3, congressional debate, all 3 of which I qualified to the national tournament. The last 2 years, I was national finalist, and last year, 2021, I was the top presiding officer as well as the House champion. That was incredibly exciting, and it took a lot of work. At the peak of my Congress career, I guess you would call it, I was doing 30 hours per week of research and prep and teaching the kids in my program who I was a captain of how to create a speech. I was very involved in Congress for the last 3 years. And after graduating, I didn't want that involvement to stop. So I created a company. It's called How to Congress LLC. And during my first year of university, I've been running that from my dorm room, having a whole bunch of fun, getting to meet people who are able to support me and I'm able to work with, and put together this massive amount of information on congressional debate that I want to distribute as equitably as possible. My thoughts with this are that YouTube is a really good way to share information. I'm going to put together a series of videos, and this is the outline of them. If it shows up, this is the outline of them. We're going to start with an introduction, just explaining what Congress is, and then go on to writing legislation, different formats of it, how to research that legislation, how to write a speech based off of the policies proposed in a docket, how to question different approaches to it, presiding, which is broken up into 2 parts, one that is the fundamentals, one that is more strategy, especially for those on the national circuit. Then we're going to go into Robert's Rules and Parliamentary Procedure, how to set up a round, just if you've never seen a round before, and what that looks like in person and not online, how to get better, speaking extemporaneously, how to prevent yourself from burning out. Mental health definitely needs to be taken care of. How to navigate tab room, how to judge Congress, and how to stay involved post-graduation. My thought is to break these up into 5 video chunks. So today I'm going to be recording the first 5. Then it's May right now, so I am leaving the States for a little bit. I'm not going to have access to computer or microphone or internet or any of that kind of stuff. So I am going to take a break after those first 5, and then after nationals, the one in June in the States, NSDA, I'm going to be putting together the next 5, so 6 through 10. And then I have a couple camps that I'm coaching at this summer, so I'll be doing that, putting together a little bit of information and making sure that 10 through 15 are not neglected, because that, while it is not as content heavy, is important. Being able to practice, not burn out, navigate the NSDA and tab, and also some information for judges and those who have graduated. So that is the tentative plan. The idea is to put together videos that are short enough to keep attention, but also long enough to dive into the concepts. This is an introduction. This video is literally just going to go over what Congress is, what legislation is, what a speech is, what the members of the chamber are. So for those of you who have never been in a round of Congress, have never seen a round of Congress, this will be super helpful. For those of you who maybe have competed or are more familiar with the format, jump to the next one. I'm just going to tell you that straight from the beginning. We'll get more into nuanced stuff later, and those presentations are going to benefit you more and are a better use of your time than an introduction that you're likely already familiar with. If you want to review, if you are a coach who has not had a Congress team before and wants to know the basic outline, this is more where you should be. So without any further ado, welcome to How to Congress. I'm glad that you are here, and I'm excited to be putting this together for you. Let me know if you have any suggestions or questions or anything I need to be doing differently. I'm definitely open to feedback and excited to be doing this. So, video number 1, Crash Course Congress. In this video, we're going to be going over the gist of congressional debate, members of the chamber, legislation formats, and the basics of how a chamber is run. So to start off with, the gist of congressional debate. In Congress, you have a docket released by the tournament prior to competition. The entire room of debate consists of 12 to 20 members, and everyone at the tournament is given the exact same docket at the beginning. In some tournaments, there may be different flights, there may be different dockets or docket assignments that you're looking at, but that really doesn't happen unless you're going to the larger tournaments like Harvard, even nationals. You debate the same thing in the House or Senate, and then there are different elimination rounds that gets knocked off for. But in literally every other tournament, you're going to have a docket released prior to competition that goes over all of the potential legislation that you could see throughout the entirety of the tournament. Legislation is any bill, resolution, or constitutional amendment. We're going to review that in just a sec. The legislation is typically proposed to the tournament from competitors who do research in the topic area and then propose the legislation and are listed on the bottom as an author. When the tournament starts, the tournament directors release the docket of all of the accepted pieces of legislation and are distributed to coaches or through tab room or to competitors directly. Once you're actually at the tournament, you're going to see that the chambers are comprised of 12 to 20 members. Usually online, they're smaller. In person, they're a bit larger. And in the back of every chamber, whether it's online or in person, there are judges that provide ranks and score the speakers based off of their fluency, the content of their speech, their ability to use rhetorical appeals, or whatever it is that those judges are looking for. When the chamber starts, student legislators take turns speaking. You always start on an affirmative speech, so someone who is in favor of passing the legislation, and then you have someone speaking on the negation, and then you repeat. So affirmation, negation, affirmation, negation, affirmation, negation, and every speech is 3 minutes with a 10-second grace period. At the end of every speech, there's a questioning block. For the first cycle, that block is 2 minutes. For all later cycles, that block is 1 minute in length, unless specified differently by the tournament. At the end of every speech, the judge is going to score speakers, typically on a 1 to 6 ranking, so 6 being the highest score, 1 being the lowest. And at the end of a round, they rank the different speakers and the presiding officer with a similar system for scorers. So just the judges, you're ranking 1 through 8, and the remainder of people get 9s. That's considered being dropped by a judge if you're in that 9 range. And then for the parliamentarian, which is a different type of judge, I'll explain in just a sec, they rank every single member in the chamber, and they do those tiebreakers towards the end of the chamber, lower ranks. So they rank everyone out in the chamber. Those points and ranks determine who is advancing from one session to the next. So if there's an out round, like quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, those are the ones that you use your preliminary scores in to see which chamber you're going to be put in. While it's not common for online debates, in-person debates used to have consolation congress, which was everyone not in the final would be put in consolation congress. We're not sure whether that'll be reintroduced when Congress goes back to in person. We'll see what happens, but just letting you know of all the possibilities. So, stages of the competition. Congress can really be broken up into 3 main stages of work. That's effort that you need to put in. Prior to the tournament, you're going to have your prep stage. That stage is when the student original legislation is submitted. So you write legislation, submit it to the tournament. And then when the tournament directors accept or deny any given piece of legislation, they'll publish a docket. That's what we were talking about on the last page. Debaters then prepare the legislation and prepare arguments in favor and against every item on the docket. The goal is to have everything covered. You want to have everything read through. You want to have points on both sides of everything. And that doesn't happen in a lot of cases, but that is your intention, to have every piece of legislation prepped. Arguments are then compiled into speeches. So with each individual argument that you have, you're going to string them together to write a speech. That speech will be about 3 minutes in length, and then you deliver that when you're in the session. For caucusing is the period of time once the chamber members have been released, but the chamber has not yet started. So during this time, members of every chamber are going to lobby for the order of the agenda and vie for PO nominations. The PO is the presiding officer, who you're going to hear about more in just a second. The parliamentarian takes control at the end of the caucusing period and transitions into the session by opening the floor for the presiding officer, who then opens for agenda nominations, and then the floor is open for debate. During the session, the floor opens for debate on the legislation in the order of the elected agenda. The agenda that gets elected is the one that has at least majority of the members present in a chamber voting in favor of debating that agenda. So say that at the beginning of a chamber, there are 3 different agendas proposed and you have 10 people in the chamber. That first agenda could have 6 votes, that second could have 2, and the last could have 2. With the 10 people present, that 6-person first agenda is the one with the clear majority, and that is the one that is debated. The other 2 agendas just aren't. So with the order of the legislation, the PO, presiding officer, is going to go through each piece, and debaters are recognized by the chair to give speeches in the affirmation and negation of each piece of legislation. The session adjourns with a main motion once debate has elapsed on all pieces of legislation or the time has elapsed. So 2 ways to end a session. There is a lot of words that you might not be familiar with: chair, floor, chamber, parliamentarian, presiding officer. Throughout the series, I'm going to be going through all of them and explaining what they are. At any time, if you don't know what something is, reach out to me, ask me. There's also a glossary resource that is put together on howtocongress.com, which has all of the common words in Congress in it. Definitely helpful, especially for novices, because then you know what people are talking about before you even get into that first chamber. Alrighty, who are the members of a chamber? There's a whole bunch of different names for them. Let's just go through. This is everything that I've ever heard anyone in a chamber referred to as: representative, presiding officer, member, judge, parliamentarian, chair, scorer, legislator, president or madam president, and senators. These 4 mean the same thing. So a representative is the same as a member, is the same as a legislator, is the same as a senator. The only difference that you're ever really going to hear is between representative and senator, depending on whether you are considered to be in the House or the Senate. You know how in actual Congress, the House of Representatives, the people in them are called representatives, and in the Senate, people are called senators? Same way in student Congress. So if in an early session, the chamber has decided, or the tournament has decided, that you are all representatives, then when referring to people throughout the chamber, you say representative, last name. So I would be Representative Smith. If instead the chamber or the tournament has decided that you are all senators, then you say Senator Smith, or whatever the last name may be. Note on last names, please pronounce them correctly. If you don't know how to pronounce someone's last name, ask. It's better to ask and be embarrassed once than it is to pronounce it incorrectly the entire time and be embarrassed for the duration of the chamber. Members and legislators are the same thing. They both refer to representatives and senators. So if instead of calling someone a representative, you want to refer to them as a member, cool, or a legislator, cool. One thing to note, do not misgender people. Don't use the wrong pronouns. It's really easy on Zoom for pronouns to be visible. So like, for example, under the Alexandra Smith, you see she, her. It's very common for online debates to have that little pronoun tag attached in a Zoom name. In-person debates, also a lot of the times on the placard, so that card saying your last name will have a place for your pronouns. You can also ask someone their pronouns. Just do it in a non-offensive way, and then once they tell you their pronouns, make sure that you continue to use whatever it was that they told you. If they use like she, her, they, like multiple, she, they, he, they, or just they, make sure that the way that you are referring to them is not offensive, and just continue to do whatever maintains respect, really. Next, these 3 are all the same person as well: presiding officer, chair, and then president or madam president. I mostly hear people referring to the presiding officer as president or madam president in the southern states. That's not a hard and fast rule. It's just what I've heard a lot of times out of Texas, especially. But this is the member of the chamber, so they are a student who has been elected at the beginning of a session to serve and uphold decorum for the entirety of the session. They choose the speaker order, the questioning order. They entertain any motions or points of personal privilege. If something goes wrong, if there's a technology error, they're the one who deals with it primarily. This person, the PO, is backed up by the parliamentarian, who is a type of judge or scorer. I'm going to explain in just a sec. Those judges and scorers are the adult members in the chamber who sit in the back and listen to every speech. They are the ones who score every speech, write your ballots, give you a speech score. So that's that 1 through 6. And then at the end of the session, rank everyone 1 through 8, and then typically give everyone else a 9. If you get a 9, that is considered being dropped by that judge or scorer. It's not great to be dropped by like one judge when you are given high ranks by others. It can be difficult to break out of sessions if you have someone who drops you. So that term is something that you might hear come up. One type of judge that you should definitely be aware of and know who is in the round, though, is that parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is a judge. They are a scorer. They are giving you ballots, but they also are tasked with the additional job of maintaining decorum in the case that the presiding officer has failed to do so, or is struggling, or it's the first time presiding, or the power has gone out in the middle of a round. It's happened. They're just the adults in the room that can be deferred to if you have questions. They communicate with TAB very actively. So if something comes up, if there's an evidence challenge or something like that, they're the ones that you can definitely ask questions to. So parliamentarian is that person. And at the end of a session, they don't just rank 1 through 8 and drop 9 like the judge scores. They rank everyone throughout the session all the way through, make sure that those tiebreakers at the end are taken care of. In a chamber, looks different in person or online. In person, you typically have, actually, I think I can have a laser pointer. Oh my gosh, I can. Okay. In person, you typically have a PO and a parley sitting at a table next to one another. Sometimes it's desks, it's a table, it's just whatever it is, facing the rest of the people. So PO and parley are facing over this way. You see the judges, and this area right here is referred to as the floor. When a representative or senator comes up to speak, they go physically stand up, walk to the floor, and they deliver their speech from the floor. When they're entertaining questions, they continue to stand on the floor, and questioners in the audience, so in the desks down here, will ask the questions to the speaker, and the speaker responds to them from there. Intimidation strategy, walk up to the person asking you a question, face them directly, face them squarely. If they're going to ask you a question that's trying to break you, they may as well do it when they're 2 feet away from you. Like you should be maintaining that eye contact, confident posture. Just be in their face a little bit. Don't be aggressive, be assertive. Representatives and senators, members of the chamber, sit here in the center, and then in the very back you have those judges. Note that the judges can only see the PO, parley, and the person on the floor's face, so the speaker. That is different from online debates. Online debates, you're in a Zoom room. It seems familiar, right? We're all used to Zoom. This has been happening for years. There's a pandemic. In Zoom, typically, everyone is just a mess. I arranged it all cute and pretty with your colors for blue for members and yellow for adults / judge scorers. But usually everyone's just all scrolled together. You can move people around in Zoom. I literally learned this in my last month of competition by just dragging their box to wherever you want them. That's helpful. The parley typically will have in their name written parley. The judges will typically have judge, but notice everyone can see everyone. So if you make snarky facial expressions, if you have large facial reactions, if you are nodding when you agree and shake your head when you disagree, it's very, very noticeable. It can be considered distracting. So be aware of your face because it is what people are focusing on, and it is something that they're able to see for the entirety of the session. I note to POs, when you are presenting online, make sure that you look like you're engaged, not like you are lazing back, and just look engaged. Really pretend that you're paying attention to every word that they're saying, even though you really, really are just looking at that timer and hoping that you hold up the cards at the right time. Next, we have a little bit of a recap. So representatives and senators, all student members of the chamber, including the PO, they are also a representative. They occupy the House or the Senate. Remember, that's representative or senator. And they're referred to under decorum without gendered terms if you can. And if you're going to use gendered terms, make sure that they're the right ones for the individual that you're addressing. The presiding officer is the elected student member asked to serve for one session. They call on speakers and questioners to the floor to speak, and they're the ones who entertain any motions, points of personal privilege, and they need to be aware of parliamentary procedure and Robert's Rules of Order. The judges and scorers score speakers and questioners on speeches. Score speakers and questioners on speakers. We're going to ignore that for a minute. We're doing well. And rank members of the chamber, typically from 1 to 9 at the conclusion of a session. The parliamentarian is the scorer of the chamber charged with upholding rules and decorum when the PO fails to do so and may intervene when necessary, but typically is fairly hands-off, depends on your parley, depends on how much they're paying attention. In some cases, there could be some things that go without notice. Prefacing happens a lot without the parliamentarian or the PO stepping in, but just different stuff depending on your PO and parley and their level of involvement really depends on how much you can get away with in the chamber. They're usually well versed in parliamentary procedure and have communication with tab. Don't disagree with the parley as a general rule of thumb, unless you know that whatever decision that they are making is wrong. You can prove that they're wrong, and they are wrong in a way that impacts something you're trying to do. So they have tournament directions confused. They are saying that questions are not based off of precedence recency, and you know that they are. They say that something is happening one way and you know it goes another, and whatever their ruling is hurts you. If they're making a wrong ruling and it helps you, staying silent's not the worst thing. Be aware that the entire chamber is staying silent. Not everyone may be aware that what they're doing is wrong. So address it during recess, maybe not in front of them, especially if you have novices in that chamber who haven't seen the way that a chamber ought to be run, just so that they know that that's not the expectation, and whatever shenanigans you're pulling wouldn't get off in a normal chamber. Just be aware. What is legislation and what are the possible formats? So legislation is the physical policy that you're debating. Remember that students write and submit it, a couple different forms. Bills and resolutions are the most common forms that you're going to see. A bill proposes a change to an existing law, establishes new laws or policies. They have an enforcement agency, implementation date, and are specific in what exactly they're enacting. So whatever policy they're enacting. They have an implementation date. So they say upon 2 years from passage, immediately on passage, blah, 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 blah. And they must be within the federal government's authority or they're considered unconstitutional. Unconstitutionality is a really common negation argument. Be aware of it, use it, have a stock argument ready for it. It comes up. There's also some stock blocks to it, so just be aware it exists. Some examples of bills would be like proposing environmental regulations, proposing taxing corporations, proposing most policy changes count as bills. Like if you are going to be having X change happen at Y date from Z enforcement, it's a bill. Resolutions propose changes to Congress's position on an issue and are more of a suggestion. So they line like a policy paradigm shift. They're saying Congress ought to go in this direction, whether that be supporting another country's initiative, supporting an international organization's something, going to impose tariffs on a country because of humanitarian issue, that kind of stuff. Resolution. Resolutions are avenues for recommendations to other governing bodies, whether those are international or domestic. You can make a resolution to encourage HOAs to do something, stuff like that. But they do not change the law. So when a resolution is passed, nothing has changed. It's just saying that the government ought to do something in this direction. Sometimes you'll see a resolution to propose a bill or to propose legislation or propose policy. And those ones have more solid impacts, more tangible impacts. But really, at the end of the day, this is suggestion. The other type of legislation that you might see is a constitutional amendment. So constitutional amendments are rare, especially at local tournaments. I've debated less than 10 in 3-4 years of debate. They're proposing a change to the US Constitution. So typically, they'll say this within the Constitution should be changed to that. The format for them is a little funky. We'll look at that next time. They're not very common. I wouldn't be afraid of them before your first tournament. If you see it come up, talk to your captains, coaches, look at the example of one. It's a combination of whereas clauses and sections, so it can kind of be intimidating if you're not familiar with the form. Something to note, both for POs and for members of the chamber, is that a constitutional amendment has to be passed with 2/3 majority of the chamber. A lot of the times a chamber will mess up and just do a simple majority vote. That's not correct. Parleys will mark you down for that. So just be aware, 2/3. Next, how is a chamber run? So chambers, if the slide, okay, chambers are run. Parliamentarian opens and elects a PO, presiding officer. The presiding officer entertains an agenda nomination and seeks majority for that nomination. Once an agenda majority has been reached, the floor is open for debate on each policy in the order that was proposed in the agenda. Speakers then take turns on the affirmation negation, followed by questions by the chamber. It should be noted that the order of speakers is determined by precedence and recency. Precedence is the number of times you have spoken. Recency is the order in which you delivered your most recent speech. I'm going to explain that a lot more clearly later. Be aware with the terms. POs know how to do it, know how to use it, because it has to be precedence and recency. Some tournaments will have preset recency, especially on the national circuit, especially with virtual tournaments, just so that it's fair and random for the first preset recency, whatever that may be. It's usually like the first, 4th, 8th, 12th, 2nd, 5th, whatever, on tab room that determines, like, it's not that hard to figure out what the random recency is going to be, which is definitely a flaw in the system, but they don't take critiques or comments. So complain about it to your coaches, see if something about that can change, because it's not fair the way that the preset is currently set up, but that's okay-ish. It just sucks when it's to your disadvantage. Speakers take turns on the affirmation negation, followed by questions in the chamber. Remember that first cycle, 2 minutes of questions, all subsequent cycles, 1 minute of questioning. Once the time has elapsed or debate is exhausted, the chamber moves on to the next piece of legislation, and the session ends when time elapsed or debates on all items have been exhausted. That's what a session looks like. That's how it runs. Note, the parliamentarian and presiding officer are tasked with upholding parliamentary procedure throughout the chamber. This determines the orders of speakers and questioners. That's the precedence and recency, and provides procedure for events throughout the chamber, like opening, closing, entertaining motions, point of personal privilege, point of other privilege, point of order. Any of those things that you hear coming up within parliamentary procedure are going to be fully explained, I promise you. They take a while to catch on to. The easiest way really is just to immerse yourself around, to observe what's going on, and just remember that when they call for a speech on the affirmation or negation of the bill that you want to speak on, raise your placard at the right time. That's all you need to do for your first couple tournaments. You don't need to make major motions. The chamber will go on if you literally sit there and do nothing. That's not true if everyone sits there and does nothing, but it's usually okay just to watch your first tournament. And if you really don't know what's going on, ask, not the PO, ask whoever's sitting next to you, ask a question. Watch a chamber before you compete. There's a whole bunch of them available online, and they should take the format of whatever it is being produced in those out rounds that are most widely available. So I know like Minneapolis is up. I think that the national recordings exist in Vimeo. There's some from like UK. There's a couple from TOC. Those are good ones to watch. Don't watch the really old ones. A lot of times they skip over everything up into when the PO is elected. So the newer ones are more helpful. They're not cut. Okay, that was it. That hopefully was not painful, but was a crash course of Congress. We went over the gist, members of the chamber, legislation formats, and how a chamber is run. This is what I'm doing. And I think that it should be a resource that is helpful. I think that sharing these videos should be, at least give one person an idea of what congressional debate is. And if that helps, you know what, it's worth it. This presentation is not going to be available until I have all of the videos recorded and published. It's available here. You can use it here. You can pause the video and do whatever it is that you want. I should mention that a lot of content and resources are available for use and purchase at howtocongress.com. That's the company that I started. That is what I'm trying to use to offset the cost of tuition throughout university. You can contact me at absolutely any time at howtocongress@gmail.com. I am going to try to be as available as possible. I also have some people helping me out with inbox and all that kind of good stuff. If you have questions, leave a comment. If you, I don't know, I hate the whatever like and subscribe stuff. Don't subscribe, don't like just whatever you want. But if it does give you value, I'm glad. So nice to meet you all. This is what's going to be happening. Welcome to How to Congress.